You know John Thompson from covering him over the years.
Yeah.
Now he's obviously the chairman of Microsoft. He took over for Bill Gates.
I think he's, first of all, those were not shots of you driving in this morning, were they? I see those cars flying in it.
You never know, Corey.
No, you're a fine driver.
I can do a lot of things.
Presumably. Look, I think John Thompson's role at Microsoft in the last, let's call it 6 months, cannot be overstated because they clearly made some really big non-Microsoft-like decisions at the board level, not least of all making the decision about the senior leadership change. And really, from what we understand, John Thompson was the guy directing the board to make the decisions that put pressure on Steve Ballmer and ultimately forced Ballmer out, even though Ballmer is one of the largest shareholders, one of the original Microsoft guys. And clearly, John Thompson had a big role in picking his successor as well.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. How involved was he in choosing Satya Nadella to be the CEO of Microsoft? Did he really campaign for Nadella to be the guy?
Well, he absolutely ran the process. And I think one of the things that we saw through the leaks, if you will, in the process was that any time a name came up in the press, and I suspect some of those names just came up because people threw them out there and made up the names, the board took the step of saying, okay, yeah, we're considering that person too, or we will consider that person. We also know about lots of people who were interviewed and went sort of as far along in the process throughout that time when they were looking for someone. So it seems like the board went through some really rigorous work to determine both the direction of the company and what kind of person they were going to get to run it.
All right, well, Bloomberg's Mia Saini asked Thompson earlier today what the biggest challenges are ahead for Microsoft. Take a listen to that conversation.
The issue, quite frankly, for us is about focus. One of the reasons why we chose Satya Nadella as our new CEO is he has a strong technology background. He understands exactly what it needs to happen or what needs to happen to move Microsoft forward. And we're excited to watch the next few months unfold as he builds his strategy to redirect the company.
Absolutely, and so much of that strategy is going to focus, of course, on the cloud. The types of companies that find the cloud attractive,
For sure.
They want fast service providers, quick service providers, flexible service providers. How is Microsoft going to be more nimble to cater to this type of consumer?
Well, I think Microsoft's Azure platform has certainly demonstrated an ability to provide a cloud-based platform on which others can build applications. On top of that, Office 365 is a very, very successful cloud-based application. And I think the combination of those two things provide the foundation on which Microsoft can clearly grow its cloud-based business. The other dimension of Microsoft's strategy is focusing on how we become even more relevant to consumers. And the devices and services strategy that was launched back about a year ago now is very much a part of that. And it'll be interesting to see how Satya augments that as we move forward.
Yeah, you are the head of a struggling company, Symantec. What lessons will you bring to Microsoft as its new chairman?
Well, I don't know if Microsoft or Symantec struggled, quite frankly. We grew from $600 million to $6 billion in 10 years. Now, the last couple of years, certainly, we did have a flat revenue performance. And if anything, 43 years in this industry has led me to believe that nothing is more important than focus.
What do you make of his comments there? I mean, obviously, we're excited about Satya Nadella, not surprised to hear him say that. But in terms of why he is the right guy to take Microsoft to the next level and confront some of the challenges that Microsoft is facing.
I think Microsoft finds itself in a moment of existential crisis, and I really mean that because the world in which Microsoft came to dominate was essentially a world built on PCs with with their software running those PCs, and they fought to get that. And then they fought the wars over word processing and Excel. There was Lotus 1-2-3. There was WordPerfect. There were all these programs out there that had significant market share that Microsoft beat down. But then they sat on that world and let the rest of computing evolve around the sides of that, with the core of the computing world still the PC environment. Now they recognize that that world's dying, that we're moving to a mobile world, we're moving to cloud computing. And Microsoft has had some very strong efforts, particularly with Microsoft Azure. So when you hear John Thompson talk about Azure as something that's really important for this company and as a focus for the future of the company, look, that's when you can see that that's where they are starting to understand that, yeah, the future of Microsoft is going to be very different with a hard break from the past.
Now, some people out there are saying that Microsoft is going to have to make very tough choices, and that choice might involve, or should involve, spinning off the consumer business and splitting the consumer and enterprise business apart. What do you think of that?
Well, I think
it would be very drastic and very different from the Microsoft that we know.
This same board that picked an insider to run the company is the same board that oversaw this reorganization just, 9 months ago at the company, which does not involve a spinoff. So that suggests
But did
to me,
involve Ballmer, their previous CEO.
right? But I think it should. But look, that was a time when the heat was already on Ballmer. So the company wasn't going to go through arguably its biggest reorg in the last 20 years without the full approval and involvement of the board, particularly if they had doubts about the CEO. So I think that any plans for a spinoff are not likely to happen soon, if ever, because this still is an inside job, right? It's still a guy from the company coming to run the company. It's still the same board that made the decisions about this reorg. It's not an outsider like an Alan Mulally or someone who might have a very different idea about how to organize the company.